6:40 in the morning, Bukit Timah, a 32,000 square foot good class bungalow with a golf simulator and a basement karaoke sits behind a gate on Edward Park. Police are already inside the compound, and a 41-year-old man jumped off his own second floor balcony, break his bone in his foot and wrist, and is found 20 minutes later hiding in a drain a few houses down. That man was renting one of the most expensive homes in Singapore, and he's just one of the names on a much longer list. I'm walking you through the 5 real fraud cases, all connected to Singapore's most exclusive, most expensive, most impossible to buy unless you're a citizen property, good class bungalow. How the money was built, what it brought at the very top, and exactly how each one came crashing down. Case 1 isn't just the biggest number on this list. It might be the most Singaporean rag to riches story you'll ever hear. Hi, I'm Edmund. On this channel, I usually cover the other side of Singapore's wealth, their family office, the billionaire legitimately moving their money, and their lives here because of stability, low tax, and rule of law. I made a whole video of that, but there's a flip side. The simple thing that makes Singapore attractive to legitimate money, discretion, Singapore property rights, political stability, it occasionally attracts the illegitimate kind too. And nothing tells that story better than a good class bungalow. 1,400 square meters minimum, landed, walled, and by law only available to Singapore citizens. It is the clearest physical symbol you can buy that say, I have arrived, I've made it. These 5 people, or in one case, a whole crew of them, bought or rented their way into that symbol. And here's how it all fell apart. This is the latest one in 2026. This week, Singapore Police Force issued a freezing of a good class bungalow at 12 Chee Hoon Avenue, valued at around $55 million. The story starts with a company called a Payroll Group, three-link firm run out of Singapore by CEO Alan Wei Zhao Lian and head of sale Aaron Woon Guo Jie, plus a separate company called Luxuriate Your Life, controlled by a Chinese national named Li Ming. Prosecutor alleged that between November 2023 and February 2025, this group bought roughly $250 million worth of high-end servers from Dell, Supermicro, and Asus. The kind of server built to run Nvidia's most advanced AI chip, by telling those suppliers that their company would be the end user. The allegation is that it wasn't true, and that the real destination for those chips was China, specifically to get around US export control designed to keep advanced AI chip hardware out of China's hand. 9 people were arrested in a joint raid by Singapore Police and Singapore Customs back in February 2025. And prosecutor says that part of the money that moved through this scheme, around $38 million of alleged criminal proceeds, is exactly what bought this good class bungalow on Chee Hoon Avenue. I want to be very clear here because this case is still working through the court. Nobody is being convicted of anything. Wei, Woon, Lee, and the 4th person, Jenny Lim, are facing charges, not convicted, and they are presumed innocent until a court says otherwise. If convicted of fraud, they are looking at up to 20 years of jail. Just this week, for the first time in this entire investigation, the companies themselves, not just individuals, are being prosecuted too. But whatever happens in court, the bungalow tells you everything about the scale of money that briefly moved through Singapore's, in this case. It's frozen now. Nobody is living in it. It might be the single most expensive piece of evidence in the country right now. Number 4 takes us from AI chip to crypto, and from a frozen mansion to one that got turned into a literal duck farm. Sue Ju and Carl Davis met at a prep school in Massachusetts, went to Columbia together, and in 2012 started a hedge fund called 3 Arrow Capital with around $1 million borrowed from their parents. By 2022, 3 Arrow, known as 3AC, was managing as much as $10 billion. Zhu alone had 500,000 followers on X, calling market tops and bottom like he had a crystal ball. And at the height of all of it, Zhu and his family were living in Singapore in a good class bungalow on Yarwood Avenue, almost 32 square feet, bought for $48.8 million. It wasn't just a mansion. It has its own permaculture farm, built into the ground, lakes, garden, and a whole self-sustaining ecosystem with ducks, chicken, and dragonflies. And in March 2022, just months before everything fell apart, the bungalow was quietly placed into a trust with Zhu's own son as the legal owner, making a baby one of the youngest homeowners in Singapore. on paper. Then came the crash. 3AC had piled into Terra Luna's token and was running massively leveraged position across the market. When Luna collapsed in 2022, so did 3AC. A court in the British Virgin Islands ordered its liquidation the next month. With more than $3.5 billion in creditors' claims, Singapore's central banks banned both Zhu and Davis from any regulated financial activities for 9 years, saying that they have given false or misleading information to investors and regulators. Here's the part that's not really well known. Zhu didn't lose the money. He refused to cooperate with the liquidators, trying to trace where over $1 billion of it went. In September 2023, he was stopped at Changi Airport trying to leave Singapore and arrested on the spot under the court's order. He served for 4 months, not for fraud technically, but for the contempt of court for refusing to answer the liquidator's question. And for the bungalow, it's still standing. The swimming pool got turned into a fish pond. The backyard is now something called Yarwood Homestead, an actual working urban farm with crops, a duck pond, and a chicken coop, co-founded by Zhu's wife. You can book guided tour, you can book a private dinner there, one of Singapore's most expensive addresses, built on a hedge fund that lost billions in a single year. It's now open for lunch reservation. Number 3 is the one that fooled some of the most smartest people in Singapore's financial industry. Ng Yuzhi was an ex-accountant in his early 30s who built 2 companies, MV Asset Management and MV Global Trading, around a pitch that sounds almost boring: physical nickel trading. He told investors he was buying discounted nickel from an Australian company called Poseidon Nickel, then reselling it at market price to bigger commodities buyer, pocketing the spread. He promised an average return of about 15% every 3 months. It worked, or at least it looked like it worked. Close to thousands of investors eventually put in money, including some genuinely sophisticated names. The General Counsel of Temasek International, a former president of the Law Society, a company CEO, and a venture capitalist known for being an early investor in Baidu. Ng became a visible face in Singapore's philanthropy circle. MUS Medicine publicly thanked him for his giving months before any of this became public. And at its peak, he was living in a rented 3-story bungalow in exclusive Bukit Timah, plus a penthouse on Orchard Road, and he owns the only Pagani Huayra in Singapore, a hypercar that's worth more than $7 million on its own. And he had close to $100 million in cars and luxury goods, which eventually was seized from him. In total, around $1.46 billion flowed into his company. But according to the liquidators who sued him, the nickel trading were never real. The warehouse visits where investors were shown physical nickel, the nickel had allegedly been sitting there for 2 years already, rented for the tour, never actually bought from Poseidon at all. The transaction documents backing the trades were allegedly forged. Now, Ng was charged in March 2023. New charges kept coming for years. By 2024, he faced over 100 of them. His criminal trial started in High Court in November 2024, and as of the most recent reporting, it's still ongoing. His mid-trial bail application was actually denied in 2025. So I want to be precise. Ng has not been criminally convicted, and he is entitled to the presumption of innocence until that trial concludes. What has already happened is a separate civil case, where the High Court in 2025 found the scheme met the definition of a Ponzi scheme and ordered former directors to personally repay more than $900 million in damages. By the time you're watching this, there's a real chance the criminal verdict is already in. I will drop an update in the pinned comments either way, but whatever the final result, the pattern is already familiar. Charm, credibility, hypercar, a bungalow, and a warehouse full of nickel that was never actually his to sell. Number 2 brings us back to the balcony jump from the start of this video, because it turns out this wasn't an isolated case. It was one piece of the largest money laundering operation Singapore has ever prosecuted. On the morning of August 15, 2023, around 400 police officers carried out a coordinated island-wide raid, arresting 10 foreign nationals at once. All 10 were originally from Fujian, China, but held passports from a whole grab bag of countries: Cambodia, Vanuatu, Cyprus, Dominica, Turkey, St. Kitts and Nevis, exactly the kind of passport you can acquire through investment migration programs, so you don't show up as Chinese national when you move money around the world. Investors say the underlying money mostly came from illegal remote gambling operation targeting people overseas, laundering into Singapore through a maze of local shell company and bank accounts. And once it is in Singapore, it went straight into the good life. Su Haijin, the man from our co-open, was renting that 32,000 square foot GCB in Edward Park for $85,000 a month. It has a golf simulator and karaoke room. Neighbors nicknamed the place KTV Central for how often it hosts loud parties. His brother, Su Baoling, was renting a different GCB on Nassim Road, designed by the well-known local firm Goose Architect. A third suspect, Wang Shuming, had disclosed assets in Singapore worth more than $200 million. When police raided his place, they found nearly $1 million in cash just sitting there. All 10 of the original suspects eventually pled guilty between April and June 2024, with sentences ranging from about 13 to 17 months, short by the standard of the dollar amount involved. But Singapore's money laundering kept out lowering what you expect, and prosecutors give credibility for guilty plea and surrender asset. Several of them were deported straight after their sentences ended and permanently barred from returning. But here's the number that makes this the biggest case of its kind. Police kept chasing around 17 suspects who had already fled the country. 15 of them eventually agreed to surrender assets from wherever they are hiding, without ever setting foot back in Singapore, handing over another $1.85 billion. Added up, and total asset traced or recovered in this single case came to nearly $2.8 billion, which is why you usually see this reported as Singapore's $3 billion money laundering case. Even the banks got hit. Singapore Central Bank fined 9 financial institutes a combined $27.45 million in 2025 for failing to catch the warning signs. 10 of them pled guilty. Multiple good class bungalow, rented, not even owned, and a reputation for financial discretion that Singapore is still working on to repair. And that brings us to number 1. This case beats everything else on this list combined, in dollars term, in years behind bar, and in how far someone fell. Lim On Kun, known to almost everyone in the oil trading world as OK Lim, started out in the 1960s selling diesel out of the back of a truck. In 1973, he founded a company called Hin Leong Trading. Over the next 5 decades, he built it into one of Asia's largest independent oil trading houses, buying and selling billions of dollars of fuels a year, expanding into storage tanks and his own fleets of tankers under a sister company, Ocean Tankers. As Singapore grew into a global shipping and fuel hub, Hin Leong grew right alongside it. This wasn't inherited money. This is about as close to a genuine self-made empire as Singapore's business world has ever produced. At its peak, Lim and his family owned at least 3 separate GCB, one in the ultra-exclusive Tanglin Hill Enclave, one in 3rd Avenue in Bukit Timah, one on 2nd Avenue. A personal property portfolio well worth over $100 million, on top of an oil trading empire borrowing from 23 different banks. And that borrowing is exactly what brought that down. When oil prices crashed in early 2020, at the start of the pandemic, Hin Leong couldn't cover his position, and it turned out why. Lim later admitted that he directed staff for years to hide around $800 million in trading losses and to forge documents, fake oil sales contract, fake shipping paperwork, specifically so the company could keep borrowing from banks that thought they were financially real existing cargoes. Hin Leong collapsed in April 2020, owing roughly $4 billion to its 23 lending banks. Still considered one of the biggest corporate collapses in Singapore history, in 2024, Lim and his children personally agreed to pay $3.5 billion back to creditors in a civil settlement, then filed for personal bankruptcy. The criminal case was separate, and is the part that actually put him behind bar. Out of more than 130 charges, prosecutors pursued just 3 of them. 3 counts of cheating HSBC, 1 count of instigating forgery, all tied to 2 fabricated oil contracts that convinced HSBC to hand over $111.7 million in financing. Lim was later found guilty in May 2024. In November 2025, at 82 years old, arriving at High Court in a wheelchair, he was sentenced to 17 years and 6 months in prison. The judge called it one of the most serious cheating cases in Singapore that has ever seen and has refused to discount the sentence for Lim's age or health. He's appealing, but as it stands, this is one of the longest sentences ever handed down in a Singapore's white-collar case. And the 3 bungalow also, Tanglin Hill went for $39.2 million to the sons of the CEO of Mapletree. The Bukit Timah house sold for $26.4 million. The third sold years earlier for $33.4 million. Each dollar went to the same bank Lim was convicted of cheating. From a truck full of diesel to 3 good class bungalow to a wheelchair in a Singapore courtroom and a sentence that will likely keep him behind bars for the rest of his life. If you want one image for how fast wealth can be built in Singapore and how completely it can be taken away, that's it. This is one of it. 5 cases, all talking about good class bungalow. Combined, these stories move something like $8 or $9 billion through Singapore's financial system. Some of it real, most of it built on lies. Here's the thing, I keep coming back to it. None of this happened because Singapore's system is not weak. In fact, the same thing that attracts honest billionaire and family officers can also attract criminals. Singapore is stable, protect properties, and is known as a safe place to keep money and run a business. The real problem is not bringing wealth into Singapore. It is finding out whether the money is clean or illegal before it enters the system. If you haven't seen the video of why other countries are bringing their gold to Singapore, you should check it out. It shares about why there are more wealth coming into Singapore. I'll put the link into the description. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.